In May 1940, Britain faced one of the darkest moments in its history. The Nazi war machine was unstoppable, sweeping across Europe. France was falling, and the British army was trapped. The world stood at the edge of catastrophe. But behind the scenes, another battle was brewing, a political crisis that could have changed the course of history. By May 1940, Adolf Hitler had launched a devastating blitzkrieg across Western Europe. Nazi forces had conquered the Netherlands, Belgium, and were now bearing down on France. The British army was retreating toward Dunkirk, trapped and facing annihilation. Back in Britain, Winston Churchill had just taken office as Prime Minister. The situation was dire. In his hands rested the fate of a nation and the future of freedom itself. But while the battle raged on the beaches, another struggle unfolded behind closed doors. A struggle over whether Britain should continue fighting or negotiate peace. With France on the verge of collapse, Halifax feared that Britain could be next. The military situation was desperate, and he believed the time had come to seek peace with Nazi Germany, before it was too late.
We must explore peace through Italian mediation. If we continue to fight alone, we face total destruction.
But Winston Churchill, the man who had just taken office, stood firm. He believed that negotiating with Hitler would lead only to the loss of Britain's freedom, and that surrender would be a far greater tragedy than defeat in battle.
If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each of us lies choking in his own blood.
The war cabinet was split. Halifax pushed for peace talks, while Churchill insisted on continuing the fight. For 3 tense days, between May 26th and May 28th, 1940, the future of Britain and of the free world hung in the balance. Outside of London, Britain's military was facing annihilation at Dunkirk. Nearly 400,000 troops were trapped on the beaches, under constant attack from German planes. Without a miracle, the entire British army could be wiped out. As the Dunkirk crisis unfolded, Churchill met with the war cabinet day after day, hour after hour. Halifax, backed by former Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, pressed harder for negotiations, convinced that Britain couldn't fight alone.
We must explore our options with Mussolini. He can mediate peace between us and Hitler.
But Churchill refused to back down. He knew the consequences of surrendering to Hitler. Britain would lose its freedom, its soul, and its future. He fought with every fiber of his being to convince the cabinet that Britain must resist.
We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall never surrender.
Days later, the miracle of Dunkirk took place. Over 300,000 British and Allied troops were rescued from the beaches, ensuring that Britain's fight could go on. It was the turning point that Britain needed. The nation would stand alone, but it would stand, defiant against Nazi tyranny.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France, we shall fight on the seas and oceans, we shall never surrender.
The 1940 British war cabinet crisis was more than a political disagreement. It was a moment where the future of freedom was at stake. Had Churchill yielded, Britain may have fallen under Nazi rule, and history would have taken a very different path. But Churchill's courage and the bravery of the British people ensured that they stood firm. They fought on, and ultimately, they prevailed. History remembers those who stand firm, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Because sometimes to win the greatest battles, you must first win the battle within.